thank you for coming. I'll let Russell do the intros. This is the first in the series of 8 webinars that we've got on over the next kind of 4 weeks, which is fantastic. Had lots of people really positive on Facebook and Twitter saying that it's great to have some subject-specific ones. So really looking forward to starting these and definitely moving on and hopefully sharing some of the recordings as well on the Globe page as well. Please make sure you share that we're doing these if people don't know about them already, and I'll hand over to Russell. Thank you very much for doing this, Russell, as well, and your team who are here.
No problem at all. Thanks very much, Kirsty. Welcome everybody to this session, which has been deliberately called Planting the Seed for Learn for Sustainability and Interdisciplinary Learning. I notice Kirsty's backdrop there is very apt with this very spring type image in the background and things growing. The point of the idea of planting the seed is, I know this year we've been, the last couple of years, in fact, well, teachers are always busy, and so this isn't a heavy presentation on Learn for Sustainability. It's not designed to give people huge amounts of workload or make your brain hurt by any means. It really is planting the seed. Basically, this year we know that the last couple of years have been huge kind of global changes. We've had obviously a pandemic. We've had so we know that obviously a huge amount of changes in the world, from the pandemic to COP26 to youngsters taking a much greater interest in Learn for Sustainability through obviously people like Greta Thunberg and things like that. And we're also looking, I suppose, forward into the next kind of few years of maybe the education landscape continuing to change a little bit, with the SQA going to whatever the SQA is going to be, to Education Scotland going to be whatever that's going to be, and whatever changes or not might kind of happen from that. So, as I say, this is really an informal conversation, really. We'll have some presentations, and then I'm keen for people here to then share their ideas of their experiences and maybe what they do in their schools as far as Learn for Sustainability and Interdisciplinary Learning is concerned, and also for those who wish to hopefully create a little bit of a community of people. So if you do want to maybe start developing, or you want some other like-minded people to help you develop, or have a conversation about Learn for Sustainability or IDL, then if we want to create a wee community and communicate with each other, then I'm keen to collect email addresses and form that little group. I see we've got about 9 or so people here. I didn't necessarily know if this would be a lot of people attending. I think 9 is roughly what I was expecting. So if going forward from this webinar we can keep speaking to each other, if you've got a particular interest, thinking about how might get over some of the problems and challenges in schools of implementing Learn for Sustainability or interdisciplinary learning, then we've got this little, I'll call this herd of people, if you want to be referred to as a herd, is meant in the nicest possible way. Okay, so that's my welcome. I'm also going to welcome and introduce Kat Carson, who's at the bottom of my screen. Kat's a current student on the PGDE Design Technology programme at Moray House just now, and coming to the very near end of the PGDE year. So I'm sure Kat will be appearing in some probational role in some classroom in some part of Scotland come August. So thanks very much, Kat, and Johnny Crawford as well, who's currently working at Kirkcaldy High School, and I know has been doing quite interesting work there about Learn for Sustainability based work and building on some of his experiences from Moray House as well. So that's the team. So what I'm going to do is, I don't want to bore people with PowerPoints, but what I'll do is I'll share my screen and then we will make a kind of start. Whilst I'm doing that, I wonder if people in the chat could do maybe a few things for me. First of all, could you maybe put your full name in the chat, because I've only got people's initials and their second name, and whilst I recognise 1 or 2 second names here, I'm not sure if I know more people than I think. So would you mind popping your name, your full name in the chat, and maybe what school you're at? And then that helps just start to create our little community here, and we can maybe make links, see who works in similar local authorities from us. And I will see if I know more people than I think just Rosemary. Hi, Rosemary, and Bob as well. And Learn for Sustainability is all about kind of community building as well. So that's a big part of this by the very nature of Learn for Sustainability. So that's good to kind of see everybody. We've got people from near Edinburgh, where I'm based, and further out as well. And oh, Claire, nice to well, see you typing, Claire. And this is always a nice thing about these things when we start kind of making contact with people we've not seen for some time. But that's great to have quite a breadth of a geographical breadth of attendees as well. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get on and share the screen here. Okay, so as I say, given the welcomes, and I've introduced the three of us who will be presenting, and obviously everybody else here will have opportunity to contribute a little bit later on. I'm quite happy to send out this presentation to anybody that wants it. So at the end, I'll be putting out a Microsoft form, so you can give your email address and I'll send this out. But you know, should anybody want to get in contact with me, I'm always happy to speak to people about pretty much anything. So russell.white.ed.ac.uk is my email address. And as I say, I'm the strand leader for PGDE Design Technology at Moray House School of Education and Sport, based down in Holyrood in Edinburgh. As I put there, just to emphasise, I'm not a learning for sustainability expert. A lot of this is me learning and me wanting to get better, and the best way for me to do that is to sort of build this community of interested people. So maybe we'll start off by really just saying what is the point of this webinar. Well, I've talked about, you know, the changing educational landscape, the changing global landscape, and so many things in the world going on that are changing, and you know, I think design technology education has a big part in that. And something from my experiences, Learn for Sustainability, which is often naturally interdisciplinary, very much comes into how I see very engaging, exciting learning. It's also to kind of say hello from Moray House. I've been in post at Moray House for coming up to 4 years now. I had plans to sort of be a bit more visible in the design technology community, but very much COVID has put had created its difficulties with that. So yeah, one of the things I want is for Moray House to sort of be more involved with schools, and schools to be involved in Moray House, and for me to get my face out there and kind of say a big hello, and let's maybe work on some of the D&T challenges together. So that's a big part of it. So again, thanks for attending. This is about sharing the practice I've had, sharing the practice Kat's been working on this year, and also Johnny's practice at Kirkcaldy. But as I say, there will be time at the end to kind of share our combined practice, and I want to invite you into sharing what you do or questions that you have about Learn for Sustainability or IDL. And as I say, if people want to, at the end of this, if you want to continue working together, it's whenever is convenient, and to build that community, then I think that's a powerful thing to do. I'm aware that Learn for Sustainability, IDL, is not something everybody wants to talk about in their school day, usually because of the 100,000 other things that we are dealing with. So I think for this is not, obviously I don't know what people's current mindset is regarding Learn for Sustainability, and this is not necessarily kind of belittle or be condescending, but I'm going to say about my mindset, about how I've perhaps got my head around Learn for Sustainability. And so one of the things that's, I think it is a brave thing to try. You know, there's lots of reasons why Learn for Sustainability, even though I suppose it's been in the curriculum for at least 2012, and IDL, which is, you know, been in 2008, why we don't get round to maybe implementing these things as well as possible, or as much as we'd like, is because of time, is because of risk, is because it's something different. So I think we need a brave mindset and prepare to be challenged, especially in design technology. I mean, all education doesn't change very quickly, but you know, I think we've got that kind of mindset of maybe challenging some of our traditional concepts and maybe some of our traditional motivations we have as teachers in general, but also design technology teachers. And when we try these things, we've got to be prepared to fail and take risks and not get it right, and that's got to be okay with people who lead us as well. And I think there's a big risk factor. I think I also want to sort of challenge a little bit, as much as I can, the fact that to me, design technology education isn't SQA. They're not the same thing. And this idea of, you know, certainly BGE leading into SQ qualifications, I know it's the real world, and I know we can't get away from that completely, but sometimes it helps just to sort of forget about the SQA for a little bit, to try and be creative, to try and be inventive, to try and be innovative. But I'd say that knowing that's a very difficult thing to do completely, but I think just ignoring the SQA for a bit of our thinking sometimes just helps us be a bit more ingenious. That also comes into challenging assessment-driven teaching, again, as much as we can, and that's not always easy globally. making the point that Learn for Sustainability is not about shoehorning Learn for Sustainability into graphics, tech, engineering, science, so I'm sure my age there, design and manufacture, part of woodwork. It's not about shoehorning it into the subjects. It's about going, design technology education is design technology education. It's not SQA. Let's give ourselves a bit of room to be inventive, and I know how hard that can be. And it's also about trying to get support from your head teachers, principal teachers, PTCs to take risks. If you want to try something, I think it's worth having a conversation, as I did with a head teacher the other day, about going, you know, if you want your staff to try things slightly different, you've got to kind of tell them that it's okay to fail, it's okay for it to go wrong, and not to feel overly accountable, because this stuff is about trying something new. And I think, again, another thing too with the mindset here is maybe thinking about the importance of words. I suppose more recently kind of thought this way of us saying, you know, design something, or make something, or design and make something. Again, I think to me there's a bit of a word barrier there. Maybe not everybody feels that. And to me, this is more about, you know, we learn for sustainability, but maybe design tech in general, about here's a problem, kids, what are you going to do about it? Resolve this problem. To me, just opens it up a little bit more for creativity, rather than design or make, or design or make. Again, maybe I'm being pedantic here, but to me, that word, or that wording makes a difference. Again, that's me really. The next bit is, well, what is Learn for Sustainability? Well, even when I go to meetings with people at Moray House, and I'm sure you all have your own viewpoints of your own teacher education, but I will assure you that, you know, some of the people I work with, all the people I work with at Moray House are fantastic, and I work with some fantastic people, a lot of people who write some of this policy as well, and they are great folk, and they're so informed, and I really do enjoy working with them, and some of them were involved in writing a lot of this Learn for Sustainability documentation. But even when I go to meetings with these people, the question comes up, well, what is learning for sustainability? It's quite a difficult thing to define in certain ways. I think this is Education Scotland word cloud, and it's still what I come back to all the time. And it's more than just simply, whether it's physics, science, or design technology. You know, we often think that sustainability is about recycling or energy use or material use, but actually we see from that graphic that it's about a huge range of things, everything from health to identity to global ideas, to climate change, to creativity, to a whole range of different things. And, you know, to this day, I still think that graphic's probably one of the easiest ways to introduce what sustainability is, and to challenge this idea of, in design technology, it doesn't just have to be energy or use of materials or 6 Rs. That's obviously great stuff, but it's about maybe more. We've also got the Sustainability Development Goals, which again is a really good kind of starting point that I'm sure you're all aware of. Again, I like things in simple terms because I'm a simple person, and one of my colleagues, I think it's Phil Higgins, who leads a lot of our outdoor learning and sustainability education, talks about it being the pedagogy of care, and I quite like that. It's just like, you know, are we doing something as technologists to make the world a better place, or to, you know, show a bit of care to something or someone? And I think we've maybe got to sort of sometimes question what does technology education is about. Now, this is not for me to suggest what the answers to it is really, but that's our own reflective internal workings of going, what do I do this job for? What's this subject about? And does it even need to be one thing as an umbrella across the whole of Scotland? Probably doesn't. So we need to kind of think about, well, our teacher identity, subject identity. I'm going to put a link to Alison Hardy's podcasts if you've not seen them. She does a seed, I think it's about 100 podcasts now for talking D&T, and a lot of what she does is what is design technology for, and they're very digestible, and they're nicely kind of chunked and easy to listen to in the car. So if you've not seen those, there's a link at the end of this presentation. To me, you know, design technology is basically about learning how to learn, thinking how to think, making pupils make informed and wise decisions. Again, coming back to me having a simple mind. One of my colleagues at Edinburgh Uni is Gert Biesta, who's a quite a renowned academic, writes a whole lot of books and is internationally kind of recognised educational thinker. And I like it, and actually in amongst all the complexities of his books, it comes down to what are we trying to do with pupils, whether it's education or design technology education, where we're trying to make wise human beings. And that's as complicated as I like things to be. But that resonates a lot with me. And for me in design technology, I'm thinking about, well, is design technology, what's it about? Well, it's maybe just partly making the world a better place for someone and something. And I think that's a good start for learning for sustainability of what we're trying to do with pupils. Okay, so moving forward, look, I'm going to ask you all to keep an open mind. There's lots of reasons why Learn for Sustainability and IDL is tricky to do and time consuming. I'm not going to go through all those on the screen just now. As we go through the conversations, yes, there are challenges, which I've put on the screen here. I'd like to keep opportunities to the fore and maybe challenges. Let's acknowledge them, but let's not make that the kind of core of our conversation today, because we know it's hard and we know it doesn't happen easily. But when we can make it happen, then it does work well. But there's all a lot of benefits from things, from Learn for Sustainability, Interdisciplinary learning, and some of the best teaching I've done, whilst hard, has been based on those sorts of themes. Again, I'll leave you to read the bullet points yourself, but I genuinely believe that it makes for really engaging, exciting, fun education, and that's ultimately what we're all about. But I am not saying it's easy. And I also think it can address a lot of things that maybe I didn't originally think about, even sort of the sort of gender balance in design technology. I think sometimes the Learn for Sustainability themes might bring in more kind of females into the subject. I don't know, but I certainly think it has bigger impact than maybe I first sort of realised. Okay, so we're now going to quickly get on to some of the talks about what's happened in classrooms when myself, Kat, or Johnny's been doing these things. So this all started because of the Natural Partners Project. The Natural Partners Project started years ago in Moray House for design technology, PGDE students and undergrads, I think, as well. And it was started originally by Adam Watley, who's now the PT of design technology down Peebles High School, when he did a secondment here, and it was supported by Forestry Commission. And then Susan McLaren, my predecessor, ran with it and made it work really well. And I just sort of inherited it. And it's a fantastic experience for students. So a lot of hard work, I think, Kat, and probably quite stressful at times. But, you know, the students come up with some really interesting things. So the Natural Partners Project is something all the students do. It's got a focus of designing a unit of design technology work based on Learn for Sustainability, which includes, well, sustainability includes outdoor learning, includes global citizenship, and also with a focus on STEM and interdisciplinary learning. So I've seen now 4 year groups of students go through producing really, really interesting units of work with all the lovely naivety that students have before they go into real teaching in the probation year, but certainly have concepts which are all really, really interesting, if maybe not always practical, but certainly the seed of what they're thinking is often fantastic. And this is about getting these ideas out there. I'm going to give you some examples of what I've done in schools. I'm going to be really quick about it. If you've got any questions about anything, just jot them down and we'll take them just at the very end. Okay, so this is what I did. I worked at Beeslack High School in Midlothian for a number of years. And I think I ended up doing Learn for Sustainability and not even realising it, to be honest. But certainly when I did these things, reflecting on it, I think the kids had a great time and they had really big impact. And I got really excited about my teaching as well. But I started with small steps, and that'd be my suggestion to you all. You know, if you've not done much in the way of Learning for Sustainability, start small, make tweaks to what you already do. So the first tweak we did was we took a graphic communication style project for, maybe this was done in S2, S3, I can't quite remember. At the time, our ex-head of department had just moved to Tanzania to work in the Lake Victoria Disability Centre in Tanzania, and that was for children with quite significant disability, often linked to quite significant conflict and some pretty kind of tragic stories, as you can see from some of what the pictures might suggest in the pictures there, about what some of these young children have maybe gone through. And the idea was to produce a dental hygiene poster, and so kids got involved in this. It was actually Gary McDonald, who now works at Bowness Academy, ran with this in conjunction with the ex-head of the department, who was out in Tanzania at the time working in this disability centre. And essentially the design brief was, you know, create a poster to help kids who don't speak English or are unable to read yet, learn them how to teach them how to clean their teeth, which was actually a really simple but really nice problem to solve, because again there was significant adult and child dental hygienes in that community, problems in that community. We had a direct link with people who could inform us about the needs of the users, if you like, in the disability centre. And the kids had a great time putting them together. It was so amazingly creative. They were considering the users, they were developing their empathy, they were understanding what goes on in a different part of the world. Because, you know, saying to a group of kids in Midlothian that, you know, you're designing something for youngsters who have had pretty tragic outcomes from kind of conflicts, and sort of hinting at what some of those can be, you know, that's pretty powerful education. And anyway, we put the posters together, they got sent out to Tanzania, and they used them, and we got feedback. And, you know, I think the kids who were involved in this got quite a buzz out of making a difference. And that was a really, really simple little project. Obviously, it required our ex-head of department out there to be working on that. It was Gilbert Cameron, for anybody who's who's maybe got that connection, although Gilbert's now retired. The second thing we did was we used to do a candlestick holder project, which was a little bit of aluminium turned and with a hole drilled in it and put in a wooden base to hold a tall candle. And we thought, well, let's move it on a little bit. So we spoke to other people in the school. We decided to change it into a blitz lantern. So we did a bit of historical design where we said, well, let's take this idea and let's pretend we're in a tenement in Clydebank whilst the Luftwaffe's coming overhead, and how are we going to get in the middle of the night from our tenement out to our Anderson shelter? So again, conflict piece, that's to do with Learn for Sustainability. It's part of the UN sustainability goals. So the kids had to consider what it would be like in that situation, consider the fear, consider the chaos, and how do you light the way in front of you in the dark in a very noisy, chaotic Clydebank and get down to Anderson shelter. Now, the picture there is a historical real blitz lantern, and it's designed in a particular way to show light being, or to light your path in front of you, but not necessarily to project light up the way, because clearly if you've got lines of people with candles, and the Luftwaffe know exactly where to drop their bombs. And this was a project that was done between history and English and RME, and also our library literacy system as well. And you know, the creativity in it was fantastic. The kids who talk about their families, they maybe had maybe older relatives who could maybe tell them something, maybe be in museums. There was definitely a huge amount of empathy again in this thing, understanding conflict. There's role playing involved, and you know, kids really understand what it must feel. Well, trying to understand what it must feel like if your tenement's getting bombed, and unfortunately at the moment, you know, that's obviously very kind of topical to do with conflict in the world just now, and that's again pretty hard hitting for some kids, but it does make the learning quite interesting and relevant. And I also managed to put Scotland's historical manufacturing past in the picture that we looked at, because well, why was Clydebank getting bombed? Well, that's where they're making the ammunitions and all the other war technology, if you like. So, you know, there's a huge amount of stuff that came out of that. So the IDL and the sustainability just sort of happened, and it was a fantastic bit of relevant, interesting, engaging. Kids who would not normally engage suddenly got really excited, suddenly started bringing their own stuff in. And lastly, this was something we did with the physics department, where we used ultrasound, one of the Mad Lab ultrasound circuit board kits, where we thought, well, let's make a device that allows blind toddlers the confidence to walk by using the beep of essentially a reversing sensor, I suppose. That then developed into a sort of search and rescue, earthquake, humanitarian aid sort of device to find people in a earthquake hit building. So both are quite powerful contexts, and again, not easy enough to say that it wasn't particularly well delivered in certain cases. I had to take a lot of risks, I made a lot of mistakes, but we ended up again really interesting, really powerful unit of work about helping some basic people in a different part of the world, or helping people with particular needs. And these ultrasound walking sticks are now something on the market that we didn't know about at the time. We use pictures like what's here, which again is quite powerful. And I've had to pick our pictures and our video clips quite carefully, not to overwhelm pupils. But when you've got kids sitting there looking shocked enough about what sometimes happens in the world out with their own community, then you get some really engaging conversation if you can make the exposure to the video clips and the pictures which explain the situation appropriately sensitive, let's say, and that's not easy. So for that, we used ultrasound technology. Kids going through this design, essentially their device to help blind toddlers walk is what we went with. And so the earthquake hit search and rescue device, that affecting health and well-being was considered. It was taught between physics, biology, and design technology. Kids brought in knowledge from all these areas to actually solve the central design problem. The problem wasn't a design technology problem, it wasn't a science problem, it was a problem that we needed information about echolocation, we needed information about ultrasound waves to actually solve this problem. And in physics, they looked at ultrasound waves, and biology looked at echolocation and biomimicry, and that was really fascinating. And with design technology, we looked at user interface and also electronics. Kids got a wee bit emotional about some of this because it was hard hitting enough. We also worked with Edinburgh University, the electrical engineering department took kids in, and they built the circuit boards. So partnerships with industry and higher education was there, which was fantastic. We did plan to try and get parental and community engagement with things like bat surveys and local woods, that we didn't quite get onto that, but that was part of the plan. And then the kids eventually finished the project by having a search and rescue challenge in the PE hall, where they basically jumped through hoops and over mats and underneath chairs to try and find the earthquake victims, if you like, which is a great way to end it. So again, just a completely different buzz to, well, maybe my more typical design technology lessons. That's I suppose one after I was a bit more confident with these approaches. So that's a whistle stop tour of what I've done. Johnny, do you want to, before we take questions, do you want to have a quick 10 minutes of your idea? I'll just take this off.
You see that?
Yeah, that's all good, Johnny.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll try and keep this as brief as I can. It's obviously a long discussion. A couple of caveats just as a start. I'm no expert and I don't profess to be one at all. What I will say is I'm quite happy to try things and fail. I came from a background of commercial product design, and if you're not happy for things to fail, then you can't really do your job. So I'm probably quite comfortable with that. I think one of the things Russell said, which struck a chord there, which I remember from the PGD as well, is what do you do the job for? And so while my project I'm going to go through might seem a little bit random for a design technology teacher, then keep that one in mind, what do you do the job for? The other thing I'd say just as a backdrop to this is that my approach wasn't going down something very obviously technology related. It was much more based on the idea of trying to join the dots between activities I would argue we could and should be doing in design technology, but linking that with mental health. My argument after 2 years in schools is still that the big school issues, attainment and engagement and building relationship, none of that happens if your pupils don't have support in the mental health. So that was the backdrop for this project. So the idea was to come up with a sort of 12 lesson unit of work. As I grew up in the country, and I think without knowing any scientific reason for it, I'd always found a certain kind of solace in being outside, spent a lot of time outside as a youngster. As I started to go into research at Moray House, I'm just going to share a few of the sort of headlines from the piece of work I did. I don't want to spend too long on this because I realise everyone's got homes to go to. But just going to read these statements quickly. I hope you can have a look at them. This is where they came from. I'm just going to rattle through these quickly. But this began to be the theme that I was looking at, that mental well-being was really affecting behaviour. So you might be in a classroom and pupils displaying behaviour that you don't like, or you find it hard to build relationships with pupils, but was this need for joined-up thinking behind some of that. Some of these statistics, particularly this one, the life happiness of Scottish children decreasing between ages 11 and 15, in large part attributed to school pressure. That's the Scottish Youth Parliament based on real life studies. I find that as a dad of 3, I find that quite a depressing statistic, and it certainly makes you think, what are you adding to the school day that might change that in some way? So this idea of access to nature spaces possibly playing a role, and what Education Scotland and other partnerships will keep promoting, which is this idea that if you're trying to foster lifelong learning and decision making or and even quality of life, then outdoor learning is a very valuable aspect to that. So this was, I realise I'm just nipping through these, this was the backdrop to the project. When I started the PGD, the first placement I went on, got into a school, and one of the first lessons I got into, pupils were sitting in a classroom, a sort of normal classroom. I certainly haven't been in any brand new schools yet. So a typical classroom, and the kids were copying out information about how to identify softwoods and hardwoods, where those timbers came from. And they were sitting with Lecky and Lecky books, copy out the text. And I remember saying to a girl, so what is a coniferous tree? And she said, I don't have a clue, it just says it there. So I wrote it down. And I remember thinking, that's not much use if she's not actually understanding what she's writing down, but I quizzed her a bit further. And as I was speaking to her, I looked over her head, and this was actually the window that I could see behind her head. So my eyes are zooming in on the fact that there are hardwoods and softwoods behind her, and that was a sort of very obvious prompt to me. Could I not be encouraging this lesson, this topic, to be taught where it would make far more sense, perhaps? So that was really what I started to marry up with the mental health aspect. So to jump ahead to what the unit of work ended up as, I came up with 12 ideas. I'm going to skip through these very quickly. I'd be more than happy to discuss it with anyone that gets in touch afterwards. But this gives you a sense of what the unit of work was, and it was naive in some ways in that, you know, I didn't have any formal training in this, didn't have any formal training in outdoor learning, and was right at a time when I didn't really understand firsthand how, you know, what factors are feeding into how the curriculum is delivered and, you know, all the other factors at school. But this is what I came up with, and the way I justified it was obviously looking at aspects of IDL, really trying to see how rich this outdoor experience could be, how it fed into different subjects. So that was the bones of the project. The lessons themselves, I wanted to look very different to a conventional school lesson, but the basic structure was trying to exploit this informal journey on foot. You know, I was imagining you'd be walking to a sort of base camp, whether that was in the woods. And for each lesson, you can see in the middle there, if the lesson was tree lore, then there were prompts for the teacher. This was all supported with resources. Prompts for the teachers to talk about things. So if your base camp activity was making things from paracord, for example, that's made from nylon. So there was then the discussion on root, this part in the middle. The lesson resources supported a discussion of William Carruthers, who invented nylon in the 1930s, invented polyamides, invented neoprene, and actually suffered from very bad mental health and was someone who ended up taking his own life through the pressures of being an industrial genius. So really trying to tie in history of technologies with activities that would get us outside and support quite a varied IDL experience. So pedagogical approaches, I won't spend too long on, but I think most of you would be familiar with most of these anyway, but these I felt fed naturally into the experiences, so they're worth a mention. The project, the rationale I wrote then focused on, you know, what's being taught, using trees as a focus. I've always been passionate about woodland and trees, so it was an obvious thing for me, but a lot of schools are lucky enough to have a park close by or that type of thing, and I felt that they formed a really useful focus for all these different discussions. How was it being taught? So immersive learning experiences, active learning, worksheets, presentations, journals. Why is it being taught? It seemed to me that CFE aspirations were leaning towards this type of thing. I find it hard to see how you get to what CFE is trying to do without using outdoor environments, but that was obviously for me to try and justify in a rationale. But continuing this theme that in taking the learning outdoors, it was trying to join up the dots that I think every school in Scotland wouldn't deny that it has a mental health epidemic amongst adolescents, and it's a really sad thing to witness firsthand. So trying to join the dots and say if we taught design and technology differently, if we designed our PGE differently, if we built outdoor experiences into quite prescriptive SQA subjects, then it's this bonus that you're reducing stress, you're reducing anxiety and depression, you're forming better relationships with the learners as well. So that's where it came from. I remember Russell asking me at some point in the project, what was I assessing and how was I assessing it? And we had an interesting discussion, and he was possibly shocked when I was saying that the activities that we were doing weren't what was being assessed. What I would try and assess was the positive mental well-being impact. That then obviously had the challenge of how do you assess somebody's mental well-being, but there are a few established ways, and this was one of them. This is the Warwick Edinburgh Mental Wellbeing Scale, which is a nice one to choose. At the time I wrote this, it was certainly one of the approved scales used by the NHS and Fife and other authorities. But if you look through those questions, it's really designed to be very accessible for the kids, but it gives you a real rich insight into whether a period of time or a unit of work has made a difference. So that's the backdrop. That was Natural Partners, and part of the reason I was asked to come along was to talk about how that then fed into life beyond the PGDE. It's a tricky one because I've learned now, certainly in schools, people have a lot of different viewpoints on how much of this stuff should be done, whether it should be done at all, how would it fit into school. The curriculum's full already. I think for me, I kind of went into my first full-time job, so probation year, thinking about these things. I tried to sum it up in 3 questions, but bothered by the fact that outdoor learning seemed to be almost the exclusive domain of early years. Maybe you try and squeeze it into BGE, but the other thing I came across quite quickly was that outdoor experiences like this could be seen as, you know, fine when a teacher's off and I'll take the class outside for a walk. Trying to really challenge that and see if outdoor experiences could be made more meaningful was certainly a focus. I'll just mention briefly, when I was not that far into my probation, COVID came along, and probably like a lot of you saw headlines like this appearing, and I was rubbing my hands together thinking this is great because we're only going to be allowed back in August if we're outdoors. This didn't end up happening, but it was an interesting glimpse into attitudes about outdoor learning, and maybe slightly cynically I came away with the feeling like part of the reason schools reopened that August indoors was through a huge amount of pressure at the possibility of taking things outdoors, if that makes sense. There are certainly challenges, but it was a shame to see this natural sort of turning point slip away slightly. What if they run away? I think this is one of the things that's said to me most when I'm taking classes outdoors. The reason I put this slide in is because I delivered CPD to the probationers at this school on outdoor learning, and I asked them briefly had they taken classes outside, and all of them said yes, one, and it was they'd taken one class outdoors and never again. So we had a really useful discussion about why some of that was to do with having a feeling like they had a 360-degree audience in the school playground. They were the only class outside, and what if it went wrong? What if someone ran away? All these different things. What I wanted to show a bit of here was things which I've tried, some of them very obvious, some of them hopefully less so, but just sharing I wanted to share the different stages, as in sort of different stages of BG in different contexts, like after school clubs or whether it was done as part of lessons. This is pupils in the area at the back of the school. The key difference here was the tree guide. You can get these online. This one was actually customised by me to deliberately make it possible for kids to find every single one. I realised that free guides can quite often be quite frustrating because you might realise you don't have any of these species around you. I also, in my probation year, put into place a tree craft club. When it was nice weather, we went outdoors, and when it was miserable, we usually sat inside and made things from tree-related materials. So this was with BGE and running similar clubs with supported learning. Again, S2. This was one of the activities which was in Natural Partners. So this was me directly trying out things that I'd sort of hypothesised about in the PGD, but these are sunprints and blueprints or cyanotypes. And the sort of way I ended up introducing that and selling it to colleagues in the end was the sort of history of technologies approach, what did we use before we had photocopiers, and we still use the term blueprints to talk about planning and architecture. So this was kids going outside and making contact prints and developing blueprints, very safe process. I've run this activity with S1, S2, S3, S4, S5. They all absolutely love it. They all seem to get the same thing from it, and it's a complete novelty, which I find interesting in itself. But the two girls here hiding behind their photo frames of S2. This slide here is now in the domain of SQA subjects. Russell mentioned there SQA and how that might fit in. I was fairly determined to try and see where things could naturally fit in, but it had to be meaningful. This is S3, Design and Manufacture, and we were learning about aesthetics, and the kids went outside for half an hour after learning the terms and had to find objects to represent each of those terms and consolidate that new subject-specific vocabulary that they had.
Sorry, Johnny, it's possible to kind of wrap up in a minute?
Yep, I'll just wrap up as quick as I can. And in terms of other projects, getting involved with other departments, this was one of the biggest projects I did during the PGDE, but this was securing funding for an outdoor growing space. So this was built during my probation year with the help of the kids. And this was something which the school didn't have at all. I don't mention it to say my school has one, your school doesn't. It's not like that at all. But even on a very small scale, getting a raised bed or whatever, it provides such rich opportunities. And we've now got numerous departments using this, including classics, linking flowers that are going to Greek mythology. I've just put that in about sort of tying in vocabulary. So really the richness of what can be taught using these IDL approaches, that's just a few bits, sorry to gloss over them. In terms of what I do now, what I'm doing at the moment is undertaking training as a forest school leader. I just want to mention, in case it's of use to anyone else, these pictures were all done as part of the FOLA training. FOLA is a new set of courses, Forest and Outdoor Learning Awards, which are pretty new. They are based on the Finnish forest school approach, but they were designed for Scotland's education system. They're aligned with CFE. They're aligned with the SCQF framework, which the vast majority of youth awards aren't. So these are available at level 2 and 4, 2 to 4. Levels 5 and 6 are coming soon. So these are qualifications which are delivered completely outdoors, but pupils are gaining a level 2, a level 3, level 4, and they can take it all the way up to level 8. And just to say that that's where I am just now, I'm now recognising, I think, and homing in more specifically on where some of this curricular change could have a real benefit in the schools, things like alternative curriculum, addressing some barriers, re-engaging pupils, and also things like enhanced transition. So I hope that's not all too random. I realise I've kind of glossed over it, but there's a lot to get in there. But just trying to get across that idea that, you know, try things out, see what's the worst that can happen. Maybe some of that gives a few ideas, and if it's something that other people want to think about, then that's fine. Very last slide, I promise, is my favourite quote that I found on my PGD by one of my heroes. This was written in about 1880. Some people see it as a very cynical view on school, but I don't at all. I actually think it's telling you that learning has to be wrapped up in experiences. It can't be all chalk and talk. There has to be something memorable there. What are your kids going to remember about your lessons when they're 20 or 30 years down the line? So there we go. That's me.
Thank you very much, Johnny. If you wouldn't mind unsharing your screen, and Kat, if you could get ready for the next bit.
Has mine come up?
Yep, that's perfect. So if you have a last 3 or 5 minutes.
No problem. So I'm Kat Carson. I'm a current student teacher at Moray House, and I'm currently on placement at the Royal High in Edinburgh. And my natural partners and interdisciplinary learning project is based on the Scottish Canals and reconnecting the younger generations with their kind of communities around them. So this one's based on the Scottish Canals, and it's a bit of a design and make project for BGE, though you may notice the outcomes are kind of based for S3. So a design and manufacture project for S3. So this project covers a field trip where outdoor learning experience at the Union Canal, where the kids can research their surrounding areas and the canal around them and get some ideas for the design challenge that they will work through. Then they'll work through a sort of mini design folio, solving a design challenge to meet the given brief that has been set by Scottish Canals. And then, depending on resources of the school, then they can do some model making and then practice their presenting skills, because I've noticed on placement, especially BGE, the kids are terrified of presenting to each other. So I've kind of put that in there because I thought that might be a little bit of fun. So the brief or the design challenge that is given to the kids is: the client Scottish Canals have set the task of designing public seating to be situated along the Union Canal. The seating is to bring unity across the community, connecting nature with past industrial revolutions. This request comes as an increase in tourism post-pandemic and to bring lost life back to the Union Canal. So this was my academic poster that was submitted along with my essay or my rationale. And I'll just quickly skim over the main parts of the poster. So the unit of work takes the form of a large case study task, which is achieved by each pupil taking small design tasks that would build the skills and knowledge to be able to complete a big design task, which is the mini folio of creating that seating for the Union Canal. So it's an 8 or a 10 lesson unit that goes through a field trip to the Union Canal, a brief launch, and then we look at ergonomics and product research, land conflict and design factors. Then we move on to more of a design and manufacture with the idea generation, model making, materials and properties, and so on to the idea, refinement and solution. So the whole project for me was based on kind of the whole formative assessment process and how can we allow kids to go through a design process without kind of having the fear of a big kind of test. So the whole project is based on the kids kind of reflecting on their strengths and weaknesses of each small and big task for every stage. So it's the kids that are reflecting on their own work rather than me or the teacher saying to the kids like, okay, you've done this wrong, you've done this right. Like, that's not really what this project's about. It's more like the kids making their mistakes and reflecting on their learning, positive and negative, things like that. So the interdisciplinary aspects of this project, so a huge shout out to the what are they called, departments in my school, the Royal High School, because they helped me with the interdisciplinary aspects. So to connect with history, a big part of the case study task is to explore the history of the canals, like why were they put there in the first place, and how the use of the canals has changed from when they were first put there to now. Geography, if we look at the conflict of users and path erosion, which are some factors that would affect the seating that would be designed and placed along the Union Canal. And then thirdly, with science, where we look at materials and performance in different environments. So obviously it's very close to water, so it obviously needs to be able to be near water and be able to be next to a canal. So really, I've just come up with a 10-unit block or 10-unit unit of work that is a design and make folio based on the Scottish Canals, just to connect young kids with their community around them and to maybe get some families and things going to visit the canal and kids being proud of the work that they have produced. So that's really all from me. If anybody wants to trial this kind of unit of work, feel free to get in touch, because I obviously haven't had the opportunity to trial this yet, but I hope someday soon I will. But yes, Russell, that's all from me.
Perfect, Kat. Thank you very much. I know it's maybe a bit daunting to be presenting to your new or soon-to-be professional peers, but thank you very much for that. Folks, that's been a really great effort from joining Kat, so thank you very much for that. We've not necessarily been left apart because I spoke for too long at the beginning. With too much time to have a chat, I'm happy to go after, I'll go beyond 5 o'clock, but I don't know if anybody's wants to either write something in the chat, questions, queries, what challenges we have to overcome, why did we do things the way we did things, or even better, to share your own experiences. I know, for example, Claire, I know we've had previous conversations about your experience with what the staff at Cambridge about, I think it was medical designing, it was arthritis design, I think, so feel free to jump in if you want to add anything, but equally everybody else, if you want to jump in and tell us what you've been doing, that's what this is all about. Hi, Claire.
Hi. All I can say is it's just brilliant to hear what's been happening and some of the examples, because I think I've just got a wee bit bogged down in what's been happening, and you just get really focused on maybe following the sort of a traditional path that seems to have kind of, in the 4 years that I've been up working in Scotland, I feel at times I've been really constrained, and it's just given me a wee boost hearing all the stories about the interdisciplinary work. And going back to some of the census stuff that I did when I was with Cambridge. So although I haven't got anything jumping out at the moment, I think it's really powerful stuff. We are doing something similar a wee bit to the outdoor learning side of things at Kelso High School. But it's very much along the sort of using a partner that work with us, and they're tracing the Tweed all the way through the borders and trying to get the students to plan a community garden and what the sense is and what kind of things would be in there. But it's just the very first start of, I think, the journey for us. But it's really nice to know that we shouldn't stop here. So that was kind of what I'm taking from it. So thank you.
Great, Claire. And I know pre-pandemic, Claire, I think I spoke to you, I think it was Vic Leggett, about getting together and actually having a chat about various different things. Unfortunately, COVID got in the way, but now that you're here, I will try and make that happen maybe for next session, because I know we had some interesting chats. Is there anybody else that's wanting to ask anything about these proposals or about outdoor learning, learn for sustainability in general?
Just very quickly, hello, hi, it's Susan Riddy here. Apologies, sorry. Just getting over the old COVID, you know. So just very quickly, it's just a couple of points that you made, and I think it's very important, as and I think you just mentioned it yourself there, Claire. It's just about working with partners. So at the moment, like you're talking about failing, I've failed miserably on my time management to try and get my outdoor learning working. But I have plans in place. It's just getting the time to it. But I'm actually working with a local area now, because I'm in Aberfeldy in Perthshire, so we've got the Cranach Centre on our doorstep, which is amazing, and they've been really good to work with. They've worked not just coming into the classroom, but are now going to help me sort of set up like outdoor workshops and things, but it's just taken a while to get going and things like that. But yeah, it's just really good to hear other people doing the same thing, because you kind of, especially because it doesn't work first time, you think, is this ever going to actually take place? It just seems to be, you know, so it's good to hear, yeah, the failing part's just part of it.
Great, thanks very much for that contribution. And it's really interesting to hear that there's other really interesting things going on elsewhere. My realm of knowledge doesn't often extend beyond sort of Edinburgh and Lothian, so that's really good. And actually what I'd say is I know Kirsty's put in a form into the chat there, not to be confused with the form I've just entered as well, which, you know, as I say, I'm quite keen to create a little bit of community here. So the form that I've put in, if that's basically asking for your name and email address and your general interest in Learn for Sustainability and IDL, and if you're happy with me sharing your email address and your current interest with others who've attended today, then you can fill that out, and I'll distribute the presentations as well if Johnny and Kat are happy with that. So yeah, do fill out both forms would be useful.
Yeah, thank you. My form's just it's an evaluation for this, but not really. It's more actually asking what else do you want, and has what we're offering just now in the next couple of weeks useful. So you don't have to do it right now, but you might want to do Russell's right now. Yeah.
I don't know if there's any other questions, or Kirsty, I don't know if we've got to wrap up bang on 5 o'clock, or but yeah, the floor is now an invite to anybody else who wants to contribute or ask, particularly because none of this is easy, and none of this is easy to sort of shoehorn, and that's what it feels like at times, this into the curriculum, depending on how supportive your PTs, head teachers are, to find time to get away from the demands of SQA assessment. You know, none of this is easy, but I think both myself and Johnny, other people in the group, and I think from the experience Kat's even had so far, that if we want to inject engagement and fun and improve behaviour and just make learning enjoyable and not just by trudging through SQA demands, and I know we can't get away from that, I know that's just the nature of the beast, but if we want to just challenge it a tiny little bit, then a lot of these things do make massive differences, and certainly for myself, the IDL sustainability work that I've done is hands down some of the best teaching I've done in my whole career, and certainly most rewarding for me. Is there anything else anybody wants to ask or add? Before you obviously fill out both surveys that have been posted. I've also put my email address in the chat there, russell.white@ed.ac.uk. If you even just Google PGDE Design Technology Russell White Edinburgh Unit, you'll soon find my email address. I genuinely want to try and get a kind of community, a herd of people who are interested in talking about this stuff and developing this stuff, and I suspect it will be a small group, but that's how these things start, and this is how these things develop. And I love talking about this stuff with the students. At this time here, I've just marked all the students' natural partners assignments, and just some of the thinking is just brilliant. Yes, it's naive in certain ways because, well, that's how PhD students are until they get into the real world. That's not an insult, Kat, that's just the way it is. But certainly the concepts are really inspirational, and we do this with our science students and geography students, and we've just recently been on a trip to Lag and Lear to look specifically at outdoor learning in the secondary school. So there's a lot of stuff we're doing at Moray House. As I say, I'm not an expert, I'm learning as well. I have offices next to experts, and I know all these people are dead keen to get involved and help directly into schools and to sort of change things a little bit for those who are up for a bit of a challenge. So don't hesitate to ever get in touch with me. And as I say, if you want to fill out that form, I will share email addresses so you can have a chat amongst yourselves as well. But other than that, I think we're going to be drawing this to an end. So thanks for your time.
And thank you. I mean, a big thank you. I just wanted to add in there as well. I mean, I know Kat and Johnny will have heard me more recently than maybe some other people going on about context being king, and this is an amazing context for CDT, and I do go on about that when I come in and speak to the IT students. I really, you know, and I think Russell mentioned it as well, that kind of we do sometimes get a bit hung up on that design and make thing, and I almost wish we could get rid of that, because it's not about that for us. You know, there's so much more to what we can have and what we can offer, that actually exploring the outdoors, exploring whatever is actually as beneficial as taking something home at the end of 8 weeks, you know. And I'm really passionate about changing that moving forward. And I think, you know, even just, you know, things are going to change in the coming years. We know that because of the reform, but actually what I hope is that even as it currently stands, our broad general education gives us a huge opportunity to do all of that stuff. There are no restraints, there are no things that say you can't go and try something new, but we just need to remember that when we're looking at the experiences and outcomes and what we've maybe previously done, that they are absolutely open for you to do whatever you want to do, and use whatever context. But again, context, for me, context is key. You know, you're the experts at pedagogy and how to do that, but actually the engaging bit is picking the right context for young people. So yeah. I was off on a rant there again. Not a rant, a kind of sermon. So I'll stop because it's 5 minutes and everybody will have had enough of that.
I'll just quickly add to, and this is very, 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 very quick. You know, as if people do want to discuss these things more, I get excited about talking about this stuff. I know Johnny certainly gets excited. Kirsty does. I don't know where Kat is with this just now because she'll be shattered from the last 34 weeks of the PGDE, and rather than than Learn for Sustainability at the moment. But even if there was a group of people, if you want to have a chat about this in a more personal setting, if you want to come to Moray House, I'll get the coffees and the cakes in, and we can have a bit of a personal gathering as well, because again, that's a big part of Learn for Sustainability, the contact, the connectedness. And as I say, if you want to come to Holyrood and share coffee, we can go to Holyrood Park and sit in the sun and talk about these things. That's how these initiatives really get going. Just have to get people interested and take it from there. But you're all of you are more than welcome to come to Moray House for a coffee and a cake.
So thank you, Russell, and thank you, Kat and Johnny. That's been fantastic, and I think the comments from everybody kind of say, are kind of saying that they're really, that this has been really useful. I had a few comments already, so thank you very much for coming along and participating today. It's been great, and please come along to some of the other sessions that we're offering over the next few weeks as well. Thank you very much, everyone.